Nonfiction writing process, 5 steps to success. Hi, welcome to First Editing. I'm JoEllen, and today we'll be talking about the 5 important steps in nonfiction writing. So, all of these steps are really important in the writing process because they focus on different elements at different stages. So, make sure you don't skip any of them. The first step is what we call pre-writing. This is where your story comes alive before you give it clear shape. In many ways, it's the most fun part of the process because you can let your imagination run free and you can do lots of research and brainstorming into your presentation. So, when you're in the pre-writing stage, you aim to find your story. Contrary to popular belief, even nonfiction books need to be anchored in an overarching narrative because it's what immerses the reader and pulls everything together. Should also try to figure out why you want to sell this, why you really you should also try to figure out why you want to tell this story, why you're the right person to write this book, and what your subgenre is. Here are a couple of questions that you can ask yourself for each of these points. So, why do you want to tell your story? What are you trying to achieve? What do you want your readers to take away? And how do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? That's the important thing to think about. So, do you have the necessary credentials and experience to write as an expert on the topic? And have you done enough research? And don't forget to research the subgenres in your field and figure out why your specific subgenre works best for this book. So, for example, when there's a difference between an autobiography and a memoir, so in that case, you'd be asking yourself why a memoir works better for you, for instance. And it also helps to compile a document of all your research resources so that your drafting process is much more effective. And speaking of drafting, let's move on to the second step. You now have a concrete narrative, so it's time to sculpt it into a book. Nonfiction writers usually have less leeway than fiction writers because you're passing along research, backed information, which means your chapters need to be organized really well. And this is why it's recommended to outline your book chapter by chapter before you start writing. And then it's time to draft for real. So feel free to write chronologically or in fragments or however you like, whatever it is that helps you put words down on a page. And since you don't already have an outline, you don't need to start at the beginning. When you're drafting, it's really good to establish a routine where this is the stage where lots of writers lose their motivation since it takes the longest. So once you have a routine, it'll be much easier to meet your word count goals. All right. Step 3 is revision. Now, this is where you take an all right draft and make it into something great. First of all, let your manuscript simmer for a few weeks or even months. It sounds a bit pointless to just put the manuscript away, but the truth is that you're creating a distance between yourself and the text, which will help you revise it with a fresh pair of eyes. Be a little bit more neutral. So, once you finally start your revision process, try to look at each chapter as an individual essay that makes its own point. It's helpful to ask yourself 3 questions. Are all my chapters mini essays that contribute to the overarching point? Do they work both individually and parts of the whole? And does their order make sense? Again, lastly, remember it's your underlying message. That's most important, that you don't stray too far from that and that you highlight it whenever necessary. So, step 4, of course, is editing. While revision is more about making major changes, such as rewriting a whole chapter or rethinking the order of the story, editing is going to look at the book on a sentence level and also a higher level. So when you edit your manuscript, watch out for any unnecessary repetition, pay a lot of attention to grammatical errors, punctuation mistakes, and typos, and prioritize coherence. Your writing style should be the same throughout the entire book, and your chapters should ideally have a similar length. And your font, citation styles, and terminology should all be consistent throughout. So if you need help editing your manuscript, you can reach out to professional editing services like First Editing, and the link is down below. And finally, we've reached the last step. This is publication. Publication often sounds like a pretty quick process, but the truth is that it can take just as long as drafting, depending upon which route you take. So traditional publishing takes longer, but you'll be able to work with a professional editor from a publishing house and get published in the traditional way. Self-publishing is different because you're in charge of everything, but remember, even those who self-publish often reach out to freelance editors or editing services, as well as cover artists, and they make sure the book is of high quality overall. This stage is also when you have to put your marketing game on. So it's a good idea to grow your social media throughout the whole writing process because you'll already have an audience to market your book to. And before we part for today, remember that writing is primarily about creativity. So if you want to create your own writing process that works for you, go for it. And that's everything. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments section below, or you can send us an email, editors@firstediting.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.